There's a sound that every Pokemon trainer recognizes. That distinctive click when a Poké Ball captures its target, followed by 3 gentle shakes, and then silence. We celebrate that moment. We call it a success, a new companion, a new friend. But what if I told you that sound, that moment of triumph, is actually the beginning of something far more disturbing than we've ever considered? What if the Poké Ball, the most fundamental technology in the Pokemon world, is actually a prison that exists outside the normal flow of time itself? And what if the man who helped create this technology spent the rest of his life trying to atone for what he'd done, knowing he could never truly undo the damage? Picture this. You're a Pokemon, standing in tall grass, battling a trainer. You lose. You're weak, exhausted, and then you see it. A red and white sphere flying toward you, and the moment it makes contact, everything changes. Your entire existence, your physical form, converted into pure energy. Or perhaps you are shrinking down to microscopic size. The truth is, nobody really knows for certain. Either way, you're pulled inside this device, this technological marvel that humanity has built its entire civilization around. And then something even stranger happens. Time stops. See, here's where things get really interesting, and where the rabbit hole starts to go deeper than most players ever realize. According to Professor Lavender in Legends Arceus, Pokemon have a natural ability to shrink themselves when injured or frightened. The Poké Ball doesn't actually transform them. It just triggers this instinct. But think about the implications of that for a moment. If a Pokemon is physically shrinking down to fit inside a space smaller than a baseball, and they're conscious while in there, what exactly are they experiencing? Are they aware of the passage of time? Can they perceive anything outside the ball? And most importantly, when they emerge after days, weeks, or even years, how much time has actually passed for them? The game mechanics tell us one thing. Pokemon can be stored in Poké Balls indefinitely. They don't age. They don't need food or water. They simply exist in this state of suspended animation until their trainer releases them. But suspended animation implies consciousness without time. And that's where the nightmare truly begins. Imagine being trapped in a space where you're aware, but time has no meaning, where seconds could be hours or years could pass in what feels like an instant, where your entire existence is reduced to waiting, conscious but dormant, aware but unable to interact with anything, until someone on the outside decides to press a button. The anime has shown us glimpses of what's inside a Poké Ball. Those brief moments where we see the interior as this strange hollow space with reflective surfaces, orange nodes arranged in patterns, and that distinctive green component that seems to pulse with energy. It looks technological, advanced, but also eerily empty. And that emptiness is what should concern us most. Because if a Pokemon is conscious in there, what are they conscious of? Just an endless void of metal and circuits? Or perhaps something worse. The games have given us hints that not all Pokemon enjoy being inside their balls. Pikachu famously refuses to stay in one, preferring to walk alongside Ash rather than be contained. And it's not just Pikachu. Various Pokemon throughout the series have shown reluctance or outright resistance to being stored. Why? What do they know that we don't? What have they experienced inside that sphere that makes them desperate to avoid it? Here's where the history becomes crucial, because the Poké Ball as we know it today wasn't always so sophisticated. 400 to 700 years ago, before Sylph Company mass-produced these devices, they were crafted by hand from apricorns. These fruit native to Johto would be hollowed out, and some kind of capture mechanism would be installed inside. It was crude, primitive, but it worked. Kurt in Azalea Town still makes them this way, connecting us to that ancient tradition. But here's what's fascinating and deeply disturbing when we look at what happened in the Hisui region. That's Sinnoh's past, centuries before modern Pokemon training became standardized. The people there had just invented Poké Balls, combining brown apricorns with tumblestone and sometimes iron. They knew, and the reaction from the locals was mixed at best. The Diamond and Pearl clans, they actually hated Poké Balls. They called them symbols of containment and restriction. They believed these devices would harm their relationship with Pokemon, creatures they viewed as brothers and sisters, equals rather than tools to be collected. Think about that perspective for a moment. These were people who lived alongside Pokemon in their most natural state, who understood them in ways that modern trainers never could. And when they saw the Poké Ball, this invention that would eventually become the foundation of their entire civilization, their first instinct was revulsion. They saw it for what it truly was: a cage, a prison, a way to reduce a living being to an object that could be carried in your pocket. Meanwhile, the Galaxy team, the precursors to what would become the modern Pokemon League, they feared Pokemon. To them, the Poké Ball wasn't about partnership or friendship. It was about control. It was about making sure these dangerous creatures could be contained, neutralized, made safe. And that fear, that fundamental distrust, it's baked into the technology itself. The Poké Ball isn't designed for the Pokemon's comfort, it's designed for the trainer's convenience. Now, let's talk about what happens when you scale this up. Because individual trainers might only have 6 Pokemon on them at any given time. But the Pokemon storage system, Bill's PC, that's where things get really dystopian. Hundreds, thousands, potentially millions of Pokemon, all stored as data, all waiting, all conscious but trapped in digital space. The games treat it as a convenient feature, but think about what that actually means. You're not just putting a Pokemon in a ball anymore. You're transmitting them through cyberspace, converting them into digital information, and then reconstructing them when needed. And here's the thing that keeps me up at night. The technology works. It works so well that nobody questions it. A Pokemon can be stored for decades, passed between trainers, transferred across regions, and when they finally emerge, they're exactly as they were. No aging, no decay, no passage of time for them at all. Which means either time doesn't exist inside a Poké Ball, or it exists in such a distorted way that the Pokemon inside might experience years while seconds pass outside. The Luxury Ball gives us another clue. According to the Pokemon Horizons anime, the interior of a Luxury Ball is different, comfortable. There's furniture, amenities, things designed to make the Pokemon's confinement more pleasant, which confirms something important. Pokemon are conscious inside their balls. They can perceive their environment. They can experience comfort or discomfort, which means they can also experience fear, isolation, and the existential horror of being aware but powerless. Let's shift perspective for a moment. Let's talk about Silph Company, the corporation that manufactures most of the world's Poké Balls. Why are headquartered in Saffron City? Silph Co. is responsible for the Great Ball, the Ultra Ball, and the Master Ball, that legendary device with a 100% capture rate, no matter how powerful the Pokemon, no matter how much it resists. The Master Ball will capture it. Guaranteed. Think about what that means from an engineering perspective. Silph Co. created a device that can override a Pokemon's will entirely, that can suppress their natural resistance, their desire for freedom, and force them into containment whether they want it or not. It's not a tool for building partnerships. It's a tool for absolute domination. And the fact that such a device exists, that it's considered the pinnacle of Pokeball technology, tells us something dark about what the Pokeball was always meant to be. The Master Ball's development is shrouded in mystery, but we know it was a top-secret project. We know Silph Co. poured enormous resources into creating it, and we know that Team Rocket, the criminal organization that ran Kanto's underworld, they wanted it desperately enough to take over the entire Silph Co. building to get it. Why? What could Team Rocket do with a device that captures any Pokemon without fail? The answer's obvious and terrifying. They could build an army. They could capture legendary Pokemon. They could enslave creatures of godlike power and use them for whatever purpose they desired. But here's where our story takes a turn, because there was one scientist who understood the implications of all this. One man who worked on the cutting edge of Pokemon research, who pushed the boundaries of what was possible, and who ultimately realized that he'd gone too far. His name, at least the name he used later, was Mr. Fuji. But before he became the kindly old man who ran the Pokemon house in Lavender Town, he was Dr. Fuji, founder of the Cinnabar Island Laboratory, and one of the most brilliant scientists of his generation. Mirjifred, the Cinnabar Mansion, that burned out shell of a building where the player finds so many secrets in the original games, that was Dr. Fuji's domain. And inside those ruins, scattered among the debris and the wild Pokemon, are journal entries, diary fragments that tell a story of ambition, discovery, and ultimately tragedy. They tell us about a research team that ventured deep into a jungle somewhere far from Kanto and found something that should have remained hidden. They found Mew. July 5th, the journal reads, "We discovered a new Pokemon deep in the jungle. Just a simple statement, clinical, scientific. But that discovery would change everything. Because Mew wasn't just any Pokemon. It was said to contain the genetic code of all Pokemon. The ancestor. The origin point. And Dr. Fuji, along with his team, they didn't just want to study Mew, but because they wanted to clone it. The entries continue. Dated February 6th, and here the language changes. In the original red and blue versions, the journal says Mew gave birth. We named the newborn Mewtwo. Burger. gave birth, as if this was a natural process, as if Mew chose to create this new being. But later versions, the remakes, they changed the wording. We obtained a new Pokemon from Mew. Obtained, taken, extracted. The poetry is gone, replaced by cold scientific fact. What exactly did Dr. Fuji and his team do in that mansion? The details are murky, but the results are clear. They created Mewtwo, a Pokemon of immense power, greater than the original Mew in almost every measurable way. Stronger, faster, more intelligent, but also unstable, angry, confused about its own existence. And eventually, Mewtwo destroyed the laboratory, killed everyone inside, and fled to Cerulean Cave, where it brooded over the circumstances of its creation. But Dr. Fuji didn't die in that disaster, at least not in the game's timeline. He survived, and he fled Cinnabar Island, abandoning his identity as a renowned scientist. He moved to Lavender Town, that somber place of graves and ghosts, and he became Mr. Fuji, a man who devoted the rest of his life to caring for orphaned and abandoned Pokemon. Creatures that had been hurt, neglected, or whose trainers had died. Let's talk about Lavender Town for a moment, because it's crucial to understanding Mr. Fuji's transformation. Lavender Town isn't just any settlement. It's a place built around death. The Pokemon Tower dominates the landscape. 7 floors of graves, hundreds upon hundreds of dead Pokemon buried there. People come from all over Kanto to pay their respects, to mourn the companions they have lost. And the atmosphere. Anyone who's visited that place in the games knows the atmosphere. Somber, melancholy, heavy with grief. The wild Pokemon in the tower aren't like other wild Pokemon. They're ghost types primarily. Ghastly, Haunter, Cubone wandering the halls looking for something they'll never find. And according to the locals, these aren't just ghost type Pokemon. Some of them are actual ghosts. The spirits of Pokemon who died but couldn't move on, who remain tied to the physical world because of unfinished business, unresolved trauma, or bonds that death couldn't break. And at the top of the tower, there's a presence, even without the Sylph scope. Even when it appears as just an amorphous shadow, you can feel it. The ghost that guards the upper floors. The spirit that makes your Pokemon too scared to fight, that dodges every Poké Ball you throw. Aburi, when you finally get the Sylph scope, when you can see it clearly, it reveals itself as a Marowak. Obur, not a ghost-type Marowak like the Alolan variant. Not a Pokemon that happens to be a ghost, but an actual ghost. The spirit of a mother Marowak who died protecting her child from Team Rocket. They came to the tower to steal Cubone's skulls, valuable commodities on the black market, and when this mother refused to let them take her child, they killed her, beat her to death with a stun baton while her baby escaped into the tower's depths. Her spirit lingered, unable to rest, protecting the upper floors where Team Rocket had taken Mr. Fuji hostage. Because yes, even Team Rocket knew about Mr. Fuji. They knew about his past as Dr. Fuji. They knew he had knowledge about things most scientists could only dream of understanding. And they wanted that knowledge. When the player finally confronts the ghost, when they either battle it or, in the Let's Go games, when they reunite the ghost with her child Cubone, something beautiful happens. The mother's spirit finally finds peace. She can let go. She can move on to whatever comes after death. And Mr. Fuji, who facilitated this reunion, who helped this restless spirit find rest, he understands something profound in that moment. This is his penance, because Mr. Fuji invented the Poké Flute. Not many people know this, but he's credited as its creator. The Poké Flute, that instrument that can wake any sleeping Pokémon, that can cut through even the deepest slumber. Snorlax, those massive creatures that block roads and sleep for months at a time. Only the Poké Flute can wake them. Only that specific frequency can penetrate whatever state they're in and bring them back to consciousness. But think about the parallel there. Dr. Fuji worked on Poké Ball technology. He understood how to put Pokemon into states of suspended existence. And now, as Mr. Fuji, he creates an instrument that can wake them up, that can restore consciousness to the unconscious. It's not an accident. It's deliberate. It's his way of saying, I can undo some of the damage I've done. I can bring them back. But here's the deeper horror. The thing that I think haunts Mr. Fuji every single day. If the Poké Flute can wake sleeping Pokemon, what does that imply about Pokemon and Pokeballs? Are they sleeping? Or are they in something worse than sleep? A state where they're conscious, but time has no meaning? Where they're aware but cannot respond? Where they're trapped in an eternal moment between waking and sleeping? The Poké Flute doesn't work on Pokemon and Pokeballs. Trust me, players have tried. Which means the state a Pokemon enters when captured is fundamentally different from sleep. It's something else entirely. And in something that even the Poké Flute, even Mr. Fuji's redemptive technology, Sheki, cannot penetrate. Let's talk about ghost types specifically now, because they're central to understanding the true horror of the Poké Ball. Ghost-type Pokemon have a unique relationship with life and death. Yamask wears the mask of its face when it was human. Phantom is the spirit of a child who died lost in the forest. Honage is a sword possessed by the spirit of someone who died holding it. These aren't creatures that evolved naturally. They're souls that have manifested as Pokemon. And what do ghost types do? What's their defining characteristic beyond their typing? They drain life force. Litwick lures people with its flame and then absorbs their life energy. Lampant hangs around hospitals waiting for people to die so it can absorb their departing spirits. Shabar. Chandelure's flames can burn souls. Sogdauer. Duskull is told to children as the Pokemon that will spirit them away if they misbehave. Maina, Spectrier can separate a soul from a body with a single kick. These Pokemon understand something fundamental about consciousness and existence. They can perceive the boundary between life and death. They can interact with souls directly. First, and here's the terrifying question. What do ghost types see when they look at a Poké Ball? Because if the Poké Ball contains a conscious Pokemon in a state of temporal suspension, then from a ghost type's perspective, what is that if not a captured soul? Trizis. The Poké Ball isn't just imprisoning the physical form. It's containing the consciousness itself, the signifies, the spirit, the life force. It's everything that makes that Pokemon an individual being, trapped in a device no bigger than an apple. The technology to separate consciousness from physical form, to manipulate the boundary between matter and spirit. That knowledge exists in the Pokemon world. Ancient civilizations built artifacts that could contain Pokemon long before modern Poké Balls existed. So when Sylph Company developed the modern Poké Ball, when Dr. Fuji worked on creating Mewtwo, they weren't inventing something new, because they were rediscovering ancient knowledge, taking principles from civilizations lost to time and applying industrial manufacturing to them, mass-producing devices that could trap consciousness, making them cheap enough that 10-year-olds could carry 6 of them on their belt, and nobody questioned it. Nobody asked if the Pokemon inside were suffering. Nobody wondered if consciousness trapped outside of time might be experiencing something worse than death. They just threw the ball, heard that satisfying click, and moved on to the next battle. Mr. Fuji knew, though. He understood what they'd done. He'd seen the research. He'd worked in the Cinnabar lab where they pushed Pokemon biology to its absolute limits, where they created life that was never meant to exist, where they crossed lines that should never have been crossed. And then he watched as Mewtwo, his creation, his sin made manifest, destroyed everything. So he changed. He left the lab. He went to Lavender Town, that place where death and life exist so close together, where the boundary between worlds is thin enough that ghosts can walk among the living. And he dedicated himself to caring for Pokemon that had been abandoned, cheerful, Pokemon that had been hurt, Pokemon whose trainers had died or simply didn't want them anymore. The Lavender Town Pokemon House is his monument, his attempt at redemption. Near every orphaned Pokemon he saves, every injured creature he nurses back to health. It's his way of saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I did. I'm sorry for what I helped create. I'm sorry for the suffering I enabled. And when Team Rocket came to the Pokemon Tower, when they killed that Marowak mother, when they took him hostage, thinking they could force him to share his knowledge, he refused, even under threat. Even knowing he might die, he wouldn't give them what they wanted, because he knew what they would do with it. He knew they would take his research and use it to cause even more suffering. In Reichshamel, the player saves him, of course. That's how the story goes. Well, the protagonist battles through Team Rocket, faces the ghost of the Marowak mother, and rescues Mr. Fuji from the top floor of the tower. And as a reward, he gives them the Poké Flute, that device that can wake sleeping Pokemon, that symbol of his redemption, that instrument that says consciousness should never be trapped, awareness should never be imprisoned. Living beings deserve to be awake and free. This temporal horror, this distortion of consciousness and time, is what haunts Mr. Fuji every day. Every Pokemon stored in a PC, every creature left in a ball for years, experiencing that impossible state he helped create. And the Master Ball. Oh, the Master Ball makes it so much worse, because at least with regular Pokeballs, a Pokemon has some agency. Come on. They can resist. They can break free. If the trainer is too weak, if the ball isn't suitable, if the Pokemon is strong enough, they can reject the capture. It's not much agency, but it's something. You see, the Master Ball removes even that small mercy. No resistance, and no choice. No chance of escape. Just absolute, total, complete capture. A Pokemon's will means nothing against the Master Ball. Their strength is irrelevant. Their desire for freedom is ignored. The ball takes them, and that's the end of it. They're trapped forever unless their captor chooses to release them. This is the technology that Sylph Cobras considers their greatest achievement. This is what they spent years developing. This is what Team Rocket wanted so badly they took over an entire building to get it. Whoa, an instrument of absolute domination disguised as a tool for friendship. And here's the thing that really gets me. The Pokemon League endorses all of this. They sanction it. They build their entire competitive system around it. Young trainers are sent out into the world with Poké Balls, told to fill their Pokédex, encouraged to catch as many Pokemon as possible. Gotta catch 'em all, right? That's the slogan. Not befriend them all. Not partner with them all. Catch them. Capture them. Imprison them. The Pokemon League could have developed different technology. Before, they could have created systems that respect Pokemon autonomy. But they didn't. They chose the Poké Ball. They chose convenience over ethics. They chose control over cooperation. Ifia and the ghost types, they know. They understand what's happening. That's why so many ghost type Pokemon are associated with death and tragedy. Bullers, because they can see what others can't. They could perceive the boundary between consciousness and physical form. They know that the Poké Ball isn't just containing a body, it's imprisoning a soul. Litwick's flame burns brighter as it drains life force. What do you think happens when a Litwick encounters a Poké Ball containing a conscious Pokemon? Can it sense that trapped consciousness? Can it feed on the life force leaking through the ball's containment? The games never tell us, but the implications are there if you look for them. Spectrier can kick a soul free from a body. Baikir, what happens if Spectrier kicks a Pokeball? Kakrechi, does the ball protect the Pokemon inside? The raid treat, or can Spectrier's power penetrate that technology and interact with the consciousness within? Again, we're not given answers, but the questions themselves are unsettling. And then there's Yamask, a Pokemon that was once human. A Pokemon that retains its memories of its previous life. A Pokemon that mourns what it once was. What does Yamask think when it sees a Poké Ball? Does it recognize the trap? Does it see the parallel between its own transformation and the imprisonment of other Pokemon? Does it understand that death might be more merciful than eternal containment? The Alolan Marowak variant is Ghostfire type. And here's something interesting. The Pokédex says this variant emerged because of Alola's unique conditions. But isn't it interesting that Marowak, the species whose mother's ghost haunts Pokemon Tower, the species so deeply connected to death and mourning, is the one that develops a natural ghost typing? It's as if the tragedy of the species, the murder of the mother, the orphaning of Cubone, it's so fundamental to what Marowak is that it manifests physically in environments where the energy is strong enough. The bond between Cubone and its mother goes beyond death. The skull that Cubone wears, that's its mother's skull. The Pokédex tells us this explicitly. Cubone wears its mother's remains on its head as a way of keeping her close, of never forgetting, of carrying her protection with it always. Now imagine, just imagine, what it must have been like for that Cubone in Lavender Town, its mother murdered by Team Rocket, her spirit unable to rest, the child wandering the tower looking for her. Brr. And when they finally reunite, when the player facilitates that meeting with the Sylph Scope, the mother can finally move on. The Cubone can finally process its grief. The cycle of trauma can finally end. That's what Mr. Fuji enables. That's his role in Lavender Town. He helps the dead find peace. He helps the living find closure. He bridges the gap between life and death, between consciousness and oblivion, between imprisonment and freedom. And he does it all while carrying the weight of his past. Because he knows that every Poké Ball represents a choice he helped make possible. Every captured Pokemon is living with technology he contributed to. Every trainer carrying 6 balls on their belt is participating in a system he helped build. His redemption isn't complete. It can never be complete, because the Poké Ball isn't going away. Society has built itself around this technology. The entire economy depends on it. The League's power structure is maintained by it. Taking it away would mean dismantling everything. So Mr. Fuji does what he can. He saves the Pokemon he can reach. He helps the souls that are hurting. He exists as a living reminder that there was another way, that choices were made, that the path they're on wasn't inevitable, and he gives the player the Poké Flute, that instrument that says wake up. That instrument that says consciousness should never be trapped. That instrument that says there's still hope for a better world, even if he'll never live to see it. Let's dig deeper into the mechanics. Because the Sylph Scope itself is another piece of this puzzle that most people overlook. The Sylph Scope is described as a device that reveals the true nature of ghost-type Pokemon. But what does that actually mean? What is it doing? What technology allows a handheld device to make spirits visible? The Sylph Scope doesn't just illuminate darkness. It doesn't just enhance vision. It reveals ghosts. That's his skirt. Actual ghosts, not ghost-type Pokemon, but the spirits of the deceased that linger in our world, which means the Sylph Scope is detecting something that exists between the physical and spiritual planes. It's perceiving consciousness that exists without a physical form. Sound familiar? Because that's exactly what a Poké Ball might be doing. If the Sylph Scope can detect disembodied consciousness, if it can make visible the invisible presence of spirits, then that means Sylph Company understands how consciousness exists independent of physical form. They've developed technology that can interact with that boundary. They can see it. They can manipulate it. They can trap it. The Sylph Scope and the Poké Ball are two sides of the same technological breakthrough. One reveals consciousness without form. The other contains consciousness within form. Both require an understanding of that fundamental boundary, that line between what is physical and what is spiritual. And Sylph Company has mastered both. Think about what that means for a moment. Sylph Co. has technology that can interact with souls, with spirits, with the essence of what makes a being conscious. The Master Ball isn't just capturing a Pokemon's body, it's capturing their entire existence, their memories, their personality, their will, everything that makes them who they are, all contained in a sphere small enough to fit in your pocket. And here's something most players never consider. What happens when a Pokemon dies while inside a Poké Ball? Come on. We know Pokemon can age inside balls, at least according to Legends Arceus lore. We know they experience time in some capacity. So what happens when that time runs out? What happens when a Pokemon's natural lifespan ends while they're in containment? Do they die inside the ball? Does their spirit remain trapped in that device? Or does death release them, allowing their consciousness to finally escape that technological prison? The games never address this, but Lavender Town's existence suggests Pokemon do have an afterlife. There are graves, there are ghosts. There is something beyond death for these creatures. But if a Pokemon dies in a Pokeball, if their consciousness is already separated from normal space and time, what happens to their spirit? Does it get stuck, trapped between life and death, unable to move on because the technology that contained them in life still holds some echo of their being? This might explain why so many ghost-type Pokemon exist. Yamask, Phantump, Honedge, Banette, all Pokemon that are explicitly described as souls or spirits that couldn't move on. What if some of them, what if not all but some of them, are Pokemon who died in unnatural circumstances? Who died while contained? Who died while their consciousness was already compromised by technology? Banette is particularly disturbing when you think about it this way. It was a plush doll, a toy, that was thrown away by its owner. The abandonment generated such intense negative emotions that it came to life, possessed by rage and desire for vengeance. But here's the question. What if Banette wasn't always a toy? What if it was a Pokemon that died while abandoned in a Poké Ball? What if the doll form is just how the spirit manifested when it finally escaped that technological prison? I'm not saying this is canon, but the parallels are there. Abandonment, containment, rage at being forgotten, desire for revenge against the one who trapped them. Banette's story mirrors the experience of any Pokemon left in a PC storage system and never retrieved. Forgotten, alone, conscious, but unable to do anything about their situation. Drifloon is another one that makes you think. I mean, it grabs children's hands and tries to drag them away. But it's too light. So instead the children end up pulling it around. The Pokédex says it's formed from the spirits of people and Pokemon. Multiple spirits combined into one being. What kind of tragedy creates that? What circumstances cause multiple consciousnesses to merge into a single entity? Could it be related to mass storage? To the PC system where thousands of Pokemon are stored as data? Where their consciousnesses exist in digital space? Potentially close enough to each other that they could interact or even merge? Again, pure speculation. But the games give us pieces of a much darker puzzle if we're willing to put them together. Tanrum. Chandelure might be the most explicit about what ghost types really do. Its flames burn souls, not bodies, souls. It lures people and Pokemon close with its hypnotic flames, and then it absorbs their spirits, leaving the bodies as empty husks. The Pokédex even says that those burned by Chandelure's flames have their souls trapped, doomed to wander the earth forever, eternal wandering. Consciousness without end. Now tell me that doesn't sound like a Pokemon trapped in a Poké Ball, but sound consciousness preserved indefinitely. Create awareness without the ability to act. It gave beer existence without purpose. And the only difference is one is framed as horror, and the other is framed as convenience. Frostlass takes souls of men it finds attractive and displays them frozen in its lair. Jellicent drags ships and their crews into the ocean depths, creating a graveyard of sunken vessels. Palawson traps people in sand and drains their life force until nothing remains but a dried husk. Balaiji Decidue can shoot arrows that follow souls, meaning it can perceive and track consciousness itself. Ivrai, these aren't just spooky Pokemon with ghost themes. These are creatures that fundamentally understand and manipulate the boundary between life and death, between consciousness and oblivion. They operate on principles that most Pokemon, most humans, can't even perceive, and yet we catch them. We put them in Pokeballs. We store them in PCs. We treat them like any other Pokemon. But what if being captured? What if being in a Pokeball? What if that's the one thing ghost types fear most? Not because it can hold their physical form, but because it can trap their spiritual essence. Most ghost types don't have conventional physical forms. Ghastly is literally just poisonous gas. Haunter is barely more solid. Gengar is a shadow creature. Misdreavus is a floating head surrounded by energy. These Pokemon exist in a state between physical and spiritual, already. They're not fully in our reality. They're partially phased into whatever dimension or plane ghosts inhabit. But the Pokeball pulls them entirely into our reality. It forces them into containment. It makes them subject to the same rules as physical Pokemon. Merging for a ghost type, that might be even more traumatic than it is for a normal Pokemon. Because they're not just losing their freedom, they're losing their connection to the spirit world. They're being cut off from the plane of existence they naturally inhabit. Like we've all experienced something telling in the games. Enter, you catch a high-level Pokemon, Scarew. You're excited because it knows powerful moves, but it won't obey you. It ignores your commands. It does what it wants. The game explains this as a badge requirement. You need enough gym badges to control high-level Pokemon. But let's think about what that really means. The Pokemon's will is stronger than your ability to command it. Okay, but the Pokeball captured its body. But it didn't capture its willpower completely. That part of its consciousness is resisting, fighting back, refusing to be controlled. And as you collect more badges, as you prove yourself as a trainer, that resistance fades. Not because the Pokemon respects you more, but because the gym badges, those symbols of league authority, they enhance the Pokeball's ability to suppress willpower. They make the containment more complete. They break down the last remnants of resistance. The badges aren't just achievements. They're keys. They're upgrades to your control system. They're proof that you have the authority to completely dominate a Pokemon's will. Bury in the league, the institution that governs all Pokemon training. They're the ones who grant this authority. They're the ones who decide who gets to have complete control. They're the ones maintaining this entire system of consciousness imprisonment. Professor Oak gives you your first Pokemon. He gives you your Pokedex. He encourages you to catch as many Pokemon as possible. Fill the Pokédex, he says. Document every species. But notice what he never says. He never says befriend them all. He never says understand them all. He never asks you to consider their perspective. The Pokédex itself is interesting technology. Truth, it can scan a Pokémon and instantly provide detailed information about it. Height, weight, habitat, behavior patterns. But how does it know this? How does a handheld device instantly access complete biological and behavioral data on hundreds of species? The answer is it's networked. It's connected to a larger system. Every Pokédex feeds information back to a central database. Every scan contributes to collective knowledge. Which means when you catch a Pokémon, when you register it in your Pokédex, you're not just documenting it for yourself. You're adding to the league's database. You're contributing to their surveillance system. Knowledge is power. And the Pokemon League has been collecting knowledge about Pokemon for generations. They know their weaknesses. They know their behaviors. They know their migration patterns. They know everything about these creatures, which makes them easier to control, easier to capture, easier to contain. The whole system is designed around control. From the Poké Ball that traps consciousness, to the PC system that stores them as data, to the badge system that breaks their will, to the Pokédex that documents their every trait. It's all control. It's all about making sure humans maintain dominance over Pokemon. And Mr. Fuji saw this. He was part of the scientific establishment that created these systems. He worked in the most advanced laboratory in Kanto. He had access to research that most people never saw on our. He understood the full implications of what they were building. That's why he left. That's why he changed his name. That's why he went to the one place in Kanto where death and life exist side by side. Because in Lavender Town, the masks come off. In Lavender Town, you can't pretend Pokemon are just magical creatures that love being in balls. In Lavender Town, you have to face the fact that Pokemon die, that they suffer, that they have souls that persist beyond death, that they're not just tools or toys or collectibles. They're living beings. They're conscious. They're aware. And they're trapped. The ghost of the Marowak mother proves this. My Bert, she died protecting her child, and her love was so strong. Her need to keep her child safe was so overwhelming that death itself couldn't stop her. Her consciousness persisted. Her soul remained. She haunted the tower because she had unfinished business. But here's what gets me. Team Rocket could see her. Without the Sylph Scope, without special technology, they could perceive her presence. Because ghosts and Pokemon are real. They're not just ghost-type Pokemon pretending to be scary. They're actual spirits of the deceased. And if ghosts are real, if consciousness can persist after death, then what does that tell us about consciousness in general? It tells us that consciousness is separate from the body, that awareness can exist without physical form, that the soul is real and can be isolated from flesh and bone. Which brings us right back to the Poké Ball. If consciousness can exist without a body, then what happens when you separate a conscious being from normal space-time? When you put them in a container that exists outside the normal flow of reality, Are you creating a ghost while they're still alive? Are you making a living spirit trapped in a technological shell? Some Pokemon seem to understand this better than others. They wouldn't. Mewtwo certainly does. After escaping from the Cinnabar mansion, after killing the scientists who created it, Mewtwo fled to Cerulean Cave where it brooded on the nature of its existence. It questioned why it was created, what its purpose was, whether it had the right to exist. And here's what's fascinating. Mewtwo allows itself to be captured. The player can find it in Cerulean Cave and battle it and catch it. Despite being one of the most powerful Pokemon in existence, despite having killed humans before, despite having every reason to hate humanity, Mewtwo lets itself be captured. Why? Maybe because Mewtwo understands something we don't. Maybe because Mewtwo knows that consciousness trapped in a Poké Ball is actually experiencing something, and it wants to understand that experience firsthand. Maybe Mewtwo, created in a laboratory, cloned from another being, existing as an artificial life form, maybe it sees the Poké Ball as a kindred spirit. Both are unnatural. Both exist outside normal biological processes. Both are examples of humanity trying to control and contain something that should be free. Mewtwo was created to be the ultimate Pokemon. Perfect genes, maximum power, superior to Mew in every way. But that perfection came at a cost. It was never born naturally. It was never part of the normal circle of life. It's a being that exists because humans decided it should exist. Dern. Just like a Pokemon in a Pokeball. They exist in captivity because a human decided to throw a ball. They exist in containment because a human wanted to collect them. They exist outside their natural habitat because humans built a system that allows them to be portable. But neither Mewtwo nor a captured Pokemon chose their fate. Both are products of human ambition. Both are examples of humanity playing God. Dr. Fuji created Mewtwo. But in a broader sense, human civilization created the Pokeball. Both represent the same impulse. The desire to control, the need to dominate, the belief that humans have the right to reshape nature according to their will, and both resulted in suffering. Mewtwo's suffering was obvious. A being created without purpose, without family, without any frame of reference for what it should be. A being so powerful it could kill with a thought, but so confused it didn't know if it should even exist. The suffering of captured Pokemon is less obvious. It's hidden behind convenient game mechanics, behind cheerful music, behind the excitement of collection and battle. But it's there, in every Pikachu that refuses to go into its ball, in every high-level Pokemon that won't obey, in every ghost-haunting Lavender Tower. The suffering is there if you look for it. Cubone wearing its mother's skull is suffering. Marowak's ghost unable to move on is suffering. The Pokemon abandoned in PC storage systems are suffering. The legendaries captured in Master Balls are suffering. All of them trapped, all of them conscious, all of them aware that they're not free. And Mr. Fuji, standing in Lavender Town, running his Pokemon house, caring for the abandoned and the orphaned, he carries all of this knowledge. He knows what he helped create. He knows the system can't be stopped. He knows that his redemption is incomplete and always will be. but he does what he can. He saves who he can. He helps who he can. And he holds on to hope. Hope that maybe someday someone will find a better way. Kirkuana. Hope that the next generation of trainers will question the system. Hope that eventually humans and Pokemon can have a relationship based on true partnership rather than technological containment. Marissa, the Poké Flute represents that hope. An instrument that wakes the sleeping, that restores consciousness to those who have lost it, that brings awareness back to those who have been forced into slumber. It's Mr. Fuji saying, I can't undo what's been done, but I can give you the tools to fight back. And when the player uses that Poké Flute, when they wake up Snorlax, when they restore consciousness to a Pokemon that's been sleeping for months, they are participating in Mr. Fuji's act of redemption. They're using his technology to free rather than imprison. They're proving that not all human technology has to be about control. Some technology can be about liberation. Some devices can restore rather than suppress. Or some tools can give back what was taken away. But the Poké Ball, the device everyone carries, the technology that defines the entire Pokemon world, that's still a prison. That's still a cage. That's still an instrument of control disguised as friendship. And ghost types know this. They understand it on a fundamental level. And then, because they exist in the space between life and death, between consciousness and oblivion, between freedom and imprisonment, they can see what others can't. They can perceive the true nature of the Poké Ball. When a ghost type looks at a Poké Ball, they don't see a tool. They see a soul trap. They see a device that does to living Pokemon what death does to dying ones. Emoi, it separates consciousness from normal existence. It places awareness in a liminal space. It creates a state between being and non-being. And maybe that's why ghost types are so often associated with negative emotions. Fear, anger, sadness, loneliness, grief. Because they recognize what the Poké Ball represents. They see the tragedy that everyone else ignores. They understand the horror that's been normalized. That Litwick guides lost travelers to the spirit world. Maybe it's not being malicious. Maybe it's trying to spare them from something worse. Because in the spirit world, consciousness exists without containment. Souls are free to move and experience and exist without technological imprisonment. From Litwick's perspective, maybe death is more merciful than capture. Drifloon tries to take children away. Maybe it's not kidnapping. Maybe it's trying to prevent them from becoming trainers, from participating in the system, from trapping Pokemon in balls and perpetuating the cycle of imprisonment. Maybe Drifloon, formed from the spirits of the dead, is trying to save the next generation from making the same mistakes. Yamask cries while looking at the mask that was its face. It mourns its humanity. It grieves for what it lost, but maybe it's also mourning for all the Pokemon and Pokeballs. For all the beings who've lost their freedom. For all the consciousness trapped in technological prisons. Maybe Yamask's sorrow isn't just personal. Maybe it's universal. The ancient civilizations understood consciousness differently. Miriolas, the ruins scattered across the Pokemon world, the artifacts they left behind, the legends they passed down. All of it points to a society that respected the boundary between physical and spiritual. They had devices that could contain Pokémon. Yes, but they didn't mass produce them. They didn't commodify them. They didn't treat capture as a casual thing. The ancient orbs and artifacts were special, sacred, used rarely and only when necessary. Not something every child carried 6 of on their belt. The ancients understood that capturing consciousness, containing a soul, that was a serious act with serious consequences. But modern society forgot. Or maybe they chose to forget. Because remembering would mean acknowledging what they're doing. Remembering would mean facing the ethical implications. Remembering would mean changing the entire system. So they don't remember. They just throw the ball. They just hear the click. They just add another number to their Pokédex. And the Pokémon inside, conscious, aware, trapped outside time, they wait. They experience whatever impossible state the Poké Ball creates. They exist in that liminal space between being and non-being. They endure until someone presses the button, until the ball opens, first until consciousness returns to normal space-time. And then they're expected to battle, ospedid to perform, to be grateful for the opportunity to serve their trainer, as if imprisonment was a privilege, as if being captured was an honor, as if consciousness contained was consciousness fulfilled. Some Pokemon seem genuinely happy with their trainers. The games and anime show us bonds between humans and Pokemon that appear real and meaningful. Sorry, Kokurin, but how much of that is genuine connection? And how much is Stockholm Syndrome? How much is the Pokemon choosing to be there? And how much is them adapting to captivity because they have no other choice? The badges break their will. The Poké Ball contains their consciousness. The system gives them no alternative. Strain, is that really friendship? Or is it just a very sophisticated form of slavery? Ancient, these are uncomfortable questions. Questions the games don't want us to ask. Questions that would undermine the entire premise of the franchise. But they're questions that matter. Questions that Mr. Fuji probably asks himself every day. Standing in Lavender Town, Dikis looking at the Pokemon Tower, knowing that every grave represents a being that once had consciousness, that once had awareness, that once experienced whatever strange existence the Poké Ball creates, and knowing that he helped make it possible, that his research contributed to the system, that his work enabled mass capture on an unprecedented scale. His redemption is incomplete. It will always be incomplete. Because you can't undo history. You can't take back what's been created. You can't unlearn what's been discovered. All you can do is try to make amends. All you can do is help where you can. All you can do is hope that someday someone will find a better way. The Sylph curse isn't magic. It's not supernatural. It's technological. It's the curse of knowledge applied without wisdom. It's the curse of power wielded without responsibility. It's the curse of progress measured only by capability rather than ethics. Humans learned how to trap consciousness in a ball, so they did, without asking if they should, without considering the implications, without thinking about what it means for a conscious being to exist outside normal time. They just did it. And now the whole world runs on this technology, or rather, the entire economy. Magfurks the entire social structure, and yes, the entire relationship between humans and Pokemon, all built on a foundation of technological imprisonment and ghost types, those beings that exist between worlds, that understand consciousness in ways others can't. They see the truth. They perceive the horror. They know what everyone else refuses to acknowledge, that the Poké Ball isn't a tool of friendship, that capture isn't partnership, that containment isn't care, it's imprisonment. It's always been imprisonment. We just called it something else. We made it colorful. We added cheerful music. We built a game around it. But underneath all that, underneath the fun and the excitement and the adventure, there's a darker truth. Every Pokeball holds a consciousness that didn't choose to be there. Every PC system stores souls in digital format. Every trainer carries 6 prisons on their belt. And somewhere in Lavender Town, an old man tends to abandon Pokemon, knowing that he helped create this world, knowing that he can't undo it, but trying anyway. Because even incomplete redemption is better than no redemption at all. Even small acts of kindness matter in a system built on control. Before even one life saved is worth the effort. Now, Mr. Fuji gives you the Poké Flute, and in doing so, he gives you a choice. Okay, you can use technology to imprison, or you can use technology to liberate. You can perpetuate the system, or you can question it. You can see Pokemon as collectibles, or you can see them as conscious beings deserving of freedom. The choice is yours. The Poké Ball will keep working either way. The system will keep running. The world will keep spinning. But maybe, just maybe, if enough people start asking the right questions, if enough people start seeing the Pokeball for what it really is, if enough people start treating Pokemon as partners rather than possessions, then maybe things could change. Maybe we could find a better way. Maybe we could develop technology that respects consciousness rather than containing it. Maybe we could build a world where Pokemon choose to travel with humans rather than being forced to. Maybe we could create a society where capture isn't necessary, where friendship doesn't require imprisonment, where partnership means equal agency for both parties. That's the world Mr. Fuji dreams of. That's the hope the Poké Flute represents. That's the redemption he's still seeking. And every time you press that button to release a Pokemon from its ball, every time you choose to let them walk beside you rather than trapping them in your pocket, every time you question whether capture is really necessary, you're participating in that dream. You're moving toward a better world. One choice at a time. One question at a time. One awakened consciousness at a time. The Sylph curse is real. It's faint, but it's not inevitable. We can choose differently. We can do better. We just have to want to. So the next time you throw a Pokeball, the next time you hear that satisfying click, the next time you celebrate a capture, take a moment to think about what just happened. Think about the consciousness you just contained. Think about the awareness you just trapped outside normal time. Think about what that Pokemon might be experiencing. And ask yourself, is this really the only way? Is this really what friendship looks like? Is this really the world we want to build? Or can we do better? I think Mr. Fuji would want us to ask those questions. I think that's why he gives us the Poké Flute. not as a tool, but as a reminder that consciousness trapped can be consciousness freed. But that technology used for imprisonment can also be used for liberation. That even incomplete redemption is worth pursuing. Because every awakened Pokemon matters. Every freed consciousness counts. Every choice we make shapes the world we live in. And maybe, if we're lucky, if we're thoughtful, if we're willing to question what we've always accepted, we can create something better than what we inherited. We can break the Sylph curse, one Pokemon at a time, one choice at a time, one awakened soul at a time. That's Mr. Fuji's legacy. That's his gift to us. That's his incomplete but still meaningful redemption. And that's the truth behind the Poké Ball. Not a tool of friendship, but a test. A test of whether we can recognize consciousness imprisonment for what it is. A test of whether we can choose compassion over convenience. A test of whether we can build a better world than the one we were given. Mr. Fuji passed his test. He saw what he'd helped create, and he changed. He left the lab, abandoned his old identity, and dedicated his remaining years to helping those who couldn't help themselves. Now the question is, will we pass ours? Will we see the Poké Ball for what it really is? Will we question the system we've inherited? Will we choose to do better? The ghost types are watching. They can see consciousness in ways we can't. They understand the truth we keep ignoring. They know whether we're ready to change. So what do you think? Does this theory resonate with you? Or am I reading too much into children's game mechanics? Have you ever thought about what it might be like for a Pokemon inside a Poké Ball, especially if time doesn't flow normally in there? Does the idea of Mr. Fuji trying to atone for his past work on Pokemon consciousness tech make sense given his role in Lavender Town? I'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts on this, whether you think I'm onto something or completely off base. And if this kind of deep lore exploration is your thing, if you enjoy looking at familiar concepts from unsettling new angles, consider subscribing because I've got plenty more theories like this one brewing. We're going to keep digging into the darker corners of Pokemon lore, the questions the games don't want to answer, the implications hiding behind cheerful facades. If you found this exploration interesting, or if it completely changed how you see the Poké Ball, throw a like on the video, or it helps other people discover these theories and join the conversation. Thanks for sticking with me through this journey into the technological nightmare hiding at the heart of the Pokemon world. It's as though race sweet dreams, and remember, the next time you hear that Poké Ball click, think about what just happened. Think about the consciousness you just contained. And think about Mr. Fuji in Lavender Town, still seeking redemption for the technology he helped create. And ask yourself, is there a better way? Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and maybe, just maybe, let your Pokemon walk beside you instead of trapping them in that ball. The sounding shark, they'll thank you for it. Besedi, let's examine some specific cases that illuminate this theory even further. Because the more you look at individual Pokemon stories, the more patterns you start to see. But the more evidence accumulates that something deeply wrong exists at the heart of the Pokemon world. Take Spiritomb for example. According to its Pokédex entry, Spiritomb is composed of 108 spirits, that were bound to an odd keystone as punishment for misdeeds 500 years ago. 108 individual consciousnesses merged together, trapped in a physical object, unable to separate or escape. For 500 years. Think about that for a moment. 500 years of consciousness. 500 years of being aware, but imprisoned. 500 years of existing as a collective when you used to be an individual. And here's the disturbing part. Spiritomb can be caught in a Poké Ball. You can add it to your collection. You can store it in your PC. So you're taking 108 already imprisoned spirits and imprisoning them again. You're put in a prison inside a prison, and now consciousness already trapped being trapped again. And the game treats this as normal, as acceptable, as just another entry in your Pokédex. What does that do to those spirits? What does double imprisonment feel like? Are they even still conscious after 500 years? Or has their awareness degraded into something else? Something less than thought, but more than nothing? An eternal scream frozen in time? The game doesn't tell us. It doesn't want us to think about it. But the implications are there. Cofagrigus is another deeply disturbing case. It's literally a sarcophagus, a coffin that contains the mummified body of an ancient human. The human spirit possesses the coffin, turning it into a Pokémon. Durnell. And that spirit, according to the Pokédex, enjoys trapping grave robbers inside its body and turning them into mummies. So we have a human spirit, traumatized by their own death and mummification, now gaining power by inflicting that same fate on others. Trapped in a cycle of creating more trapped consciousness. And trainers catch this Pokemon, put it in a ball, use it for battles. Nobody questions whether this human turned Pokemon might want to move on, whether they might want to escape their undead existence, whether being caught in a Poké Ball is adding insult to injury for someone who's already been dead for centuries. We just throw the ball. We just claim the catch. We just add another number to our count. Aegislash presents yet another variation on this theme. It's a sword possessed by the spirit of someone who died wielding it, and according to its Pokédex entry, Aegislash can detect the qualities of leadership in humans. It bonds with people who have the potential to be kings. But here's the dark part. Those who are chosen by Aegislash are bound to it. They become its wielders whether they want to or not. The sword chooses the king. The king doesn't choose the sword. It's possession masquerading as partnership. And when you catch Aegislash in a Poké Ball, you're interrupting that relationship. You're severing a bond that Aegislash formed based on its own criteria. You're forcing it to accept you as its trainer regardless of whether you meet its standards. The Poké Ball overrides the Pokemon's choice. Even when the Pokemon is a spirit with its own agenda. Even when it has its own criteria for partnership. Even when it should have the autonomy to choose. The ball doesn't care. The technology doesn't respect consciousness. It just contains. Gengar is particularly interesting because it's been with the franchise since the beginning. One of the original ghost types. And its Pokédex entries across generations tell a consistent Gengar hides in shadows. It drops the temperature of its surroundings by 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Like curries, it seeks out humans to curse. And according to one entry, it wishes for a traveling companion, but doesn't know how to act around people. That last detail is heartbreaking when you think about it. Gengar's lonely, and Kabwo, it wants companionship, but it doesn't understand social interaction. Exkur, so it approaches people through shadows, through temperature drops, through curses. It tries to connect in the only way it knows how, and people are terrified of it. But here's the question. When you catch Gengar in a Poké Ball, are you giving it the companion it wants? Or are you imprisoning a lonely spirit that will now be even more isolated inside technological containment? Gengar evolved from Haunter, and Haunter evolved from Ghastly. The entire line is about spirits seeking connection. Ghastly surrounds prey with poisonous gas. Haunter licks victims with a gaseous tongue that causes eternal shaking. Or Gengar lurks in shadows seeking companions. Each stage is trying to interact with living beings, trying to bridge the gap between the spirit world and the physical world, trying to find some kind of connection. And humans respond by catching them, by putting them in balls, by storing them in PCs, by treating their desperate attempts at connection as attacks to be defended against. Maybe Gengar doesn't know how to act around people because every time it tries, it gets captured. Maybe its social skills are stunted because humans won't let it interact normally. Maybe the reason ghost types curse and frighten is because that's the only impact they can have on the physical world before someone throws a Pokeball at them. Miokch. The Cinnabar Mansion journals give us more pieces of this puzzle. Gior, beyond the famous entries about Mew and Mewtwo, there are other fragments scattered through those ruins. References to failed experiments. They were notes about Pokemon that didn't survive the research process. Hints about studies into Pokemon consciousness itself. One journal entry mentions that Pokemon have dreams, that when they sleep, they experience something similar to human dreams, which confirms consciousness, which confirms internal mental states, which confirms that Pokemon have subjective experiences. Another entry discusses Pokemon communication, how different species have different methods of conveying information, how some use sounds, others use telepathy, others use changes in their body temperature or electrical fields. The scientists were trying to decode these communication methods, trying to understand what Pokemon were saying to each other. Why? What did they hope to learn? And more importantly, what did they actually learn that isn't written in the surviving journals? Ad-Din. Because the mansion burned down, Patina, Mewtwo destroyed it, and most of the research was lost. But Dr. Fuji survived. He escaped. He knows what they discovered. He knows what they learned about Pokemon consciousness, and he chose to walk away from all of it. That tells us something important. Whatever they learned, it was bad enough that Dr. Fuji couldn't continue. It was disturbing enough that he abandoned his identity and devoted the rest of his life to helping abandon Pokemon. It was significant enough that he created the Poké Flute as a counter technology. What did they discover? Whatever they learned, it changed everything for Dr. Fuji. We'll never know for certain. The journals are incomplete. The research is gone. Dr. Fuji isn't talking, but his actions speak volumes. Blaine adds another piece to this puzzle. the gym leader of Cinnabar Island, the fire-type specialist who runs his gym in a building shaped like a volcano in fire red and leaf green. There's a photo in Blaine's gym showing him standing with Mr. Fuji. The two of them together, smiling, friends. And in Let's Go, Blaine mentions that the Pokémon mansion contains remnants of his old friend's research, which confirms the connection, which proves that Blaine knew Dr. Fuji, which means Blaine knows what happened at that mansion, but Blaine still uses Poké Balls. He still participates in the league system. He still gives out badges that enhance trainer control over Pokémon. Why? If he knows what Dr. Fuji learned, if he understands what happened at the mansion, why does he continue? Maybe because he made a different choice. Maybe because he decided that the benefits outweigh the costs. Maybe because he believes the relationship between humans and Pokémon is worth preserving, even if it requires technological imprisonment. Or maybe because he's trapped too. There's no rating brick. Trapped in a system that won't let him leave. Trapped by expectations and obligations. Trapped by the knowledge that one person can't change an entire civilization. Blaine and Mr. Fuji represent two responses to the same knowledge. One continues participating in the system while knowing its flaws. The other walks away and tries to offer an alternative. Neither response is perfect. Both involve compromise. Both involve living with uncomfortable truths. The Team Rocket connection deepens this further. Giovanni, the leader of Team Rocket, he wanted the Master Ball. He took over Sylph Co. headquarters specifically to get it. He held the president hostage. He deployed his entire criminal organization to secure this one piece of technology. Why was it so important to him? Yes, obviously the Master Ball's perfect capture rate makes it valuable. But Giovanni already had access to Poké Balls. His organization used them constantly. He could already capture and control Pokémon. What made the Master Ball different? I think it's about legendary Pokémon. Giovanni wanted the power to capture beings of godlike strength. He wanted to control the weather by capturing Articuno, Zapdos, or Moltres. He wanted to dominate time and space by catching Dialga or Palkia. He wanted ultimate power by imprisoning Arceus itself. And the Master Ball would let him do it. No resistance, no choice, no escape. Even legendary Pokémon, even creatures that shape the world itself, even beings that predate human civilization. The Master Ball would trap them all. That's what Giovanni wanted. That's what Sylph Co. created. That's what the player receives as a reward for stopping Team Rocket. The game gives you the ultimate instrument of consciousness imprisonment and expects you to be grateful. It hands you the key to trapping gods and treats it as a prize. It provides the tool to override any Pokemon's will and frames it as helping you complete your journey. But what happens if you use the Master Ball on a legendary Pokemon? What happens when you trap a being that was never meant to be contained? Mewtwo was created in a lab, and it destroyed the building when it achieved consciousness. Imagine what Arceus, the literal creator of the universe, might do if it's trapped against its will. Imagine the rage, the betrayal, the fundamental violation of being imprisoned when you created the laws of reality itself. The Master Ball doesn't care. It contains anyway. It traps without mercy. It imprisons without exception. And trainers use it, never questioning whether this might be taking things too far. Never asking if there's a line that shouldn't be crossed. Never wondering if maybe, just maybe, some Pokemon should remain free. Giratina adds another layer to this, the antimatter Pokemon. The Beanthe was banished to the distortion world for being too violent. Giratina exists in a realm where physics works differently, where time and space are twisted, where reality itself doesn't follow normal rules. And trainers can catch it. They can pull a being from an alternate dimension, force it into a Poké Ball, and trap it in their pocket. But here's what gets me. For the distortion world is already a prison. It's where Arceus banished Giratina, its punishment, its isolation, its exile from the normal universe. So when you catch Giratina, you're double imprisoning it. You're taking a being that's already been banished and trapping it even further. You're adding technological containment to cosmic punishment. How much consciousness can be compressed before it breaks? How much imprisonment can awareness endure before it fragments? How much isolation can a being survive before they stop being who they were? The game doesn't ask these questions, but they matter. They matter a lot. Darkrai presents an interesting case study in consciousness and imprisonment. Darkrai is the nightmare Pokemon. It causes terrible dreams in anyone nearby. It can't control this ability. It just happens. So Darkrai isolates itself to protect others from its power. It chooses loneliness to prevent harm. It accepts isolation to keep others safe. It imprisons itself voluntarily because the alternative is causing suffering. And then trainers catch it anyway. They force it into a Poké Ball. They trap a being that was already trapped. They imprison something that chose exile specifically to avoid causing harm. What does that do to Darkrai? Matt, does it understand that it's been captured? Does it feel relief that it can't cause nightmares while in the ball? Or does it experience terror at being in a container it can't escape? With no ability to choose isolation anymore? And what happens when you release Darkrai from its Poké Ball? Does it immediately cause nightmares in everyone around it? Error. Does its power activate the moment consciousness is restored to normal space-time? Does it hate being used in battle because every fight means causing suffering it tried to avoid? We don't know. The game doesn't tell us. But Darkrai chose exile for a reason, and we took that choice away. It's 6. Cresselia is Darkrai's counterpart. Piscarxi, the lunar Pokemon that cures nightmares. Orion, that brings pleasant dreams. That serves as a beacon of hope in darkness. Daniliokert, and it can be caught too. The cure for nightmares. Ditchurb, trapped in a nightmare of its own. Sigi, the source of pleasant dreams. Forced into whatever dreamless state the Pokeball creates. The opposite of Darkrai in every way, except that both end up in the same technological prison. Victini is said to bring victory to its trainer. Any trainer who has Victini will win their battles. It's a mythical Pokemon associated with success and triumph. But the victory Pokemon is itself defeated every time it's captured. Its very existence contradicts its purpose. How does that affect Victini's consciousness? Does it understand the irony? Does it realize that bringing victory to others means accepting defeat for itself? Does it experience cognitive dissonance at being the symbol of success while trapped in technological imprisonment? The Pokémon world is full of these contradictions. Creatures defined by freedom who are imprisoned. Beings associated with power who are dominated. Spirits connected to choice who have no agency. And at the center of all these contradictions, there's a little red and white sphere, the Poké Ball, the device that makes everything possible, the technology that everyone accepts, the prison that nobody questions, Bobaiko, until someone does, until someone like Dr. Fuji sees what they've created and can't live with it anymore, until someone walks away and tries to offer an alternative. Until someone gives you a Poké Flute and hopes you'll understand what it represents. Mr. Fuji stands in Lavender Town, surrounded by graves, caring for abandoned Pokémon, knowing that he helped build the system that creates those abandoned Pokémon in the first place. The system that makes Pokémon portable makes them disposable. The technology that makes them convenient to carry makes them easy to discard, the perlaying. The device that lets you catch them effortlessly lets you abandon them without consequence. Meladbunt. Just transfer them to the PC. Skrikin RNA. Just store them digitally. Just forget about them. They're not in your party anymore, so they're not your problem. Except they're still conscious. They're still aware. They're still waiting for someone to press that button and release them back into the world. And some of them will wait forever. Mr. Fuji knows this. That's why he runs the Pokemon house. That's why he takes in the abandoned ones. That's why he gives them love and care and treats them as individuals rather than data. But he can't save them all. There are too many. The system produces abandoned Pokemon faster than he can help them. For every one he saves, 100 more are discarded. For every consciousness he liberates, 1,000 more are trapped. His redemption is incomplete. It will always be incomplete. Because the problem isn't individual trainers. The problem is the system itself. The problem is a civilization built on consciousness imprisonment. The problem is technology that makes it too easy to trap and too easy to forget. And one old man running a Pokemon house can't fix that. But he tries anyway. Because even incomplete redemption matters. Because even small acts of kindness count. Because even one saved Pokemon is worth the effort. That's what Mr. Fuji teaches us. That's what the Poké Flute represents. That's what Lavender Town symbolizes. In a world built on convenient imprisonment, acts of liberation become revolutionary. In a system designed for control, moments of genuine partnership become subversive. In a civilization that treats consciousness as commodity, treating beings as individuals becomes radical. Mr. Fuji is a revolutionary. He just doesn't use violence. He uses compassion. And he hopes that someday, someone will see what he's trying to show them. That there's another way. That technology doesn't have to trap. That humans and Pokemon can relate without imprisonment. That consciousness deserves respect, not containment. The Poké Ball will keep existing. The system will keep running. But maybe, just maybe, we can change how we use it. Maybe we can catch less and partner more. Brittany, maybe we can store less and interact more. Maybe we can collect less and respect more. That's the choice Mr. Fuji offers. That's the hope the Poké Flute represents. That's the alternative Lavender Town suggests. And that's why this theory matters. Not because the Poké Ball is evil. Not because trainers are villains. Not because the Pokemon world is irredeemable. But because consciousness matters. Because awareness deserves respect. Because beings capable of thought and feeling shouldn't be treated as objects. And if we can see that, if we can understand what the Poké Ball really represents, maybe we can do better. Maybe we can build something better. Me son mío. Maybe we can create a world where ghost types don't have to be the only ones who see the truth. Or madam, where everyone recognizes consciousness imprisonment for what it is. Where technology serves liberation rather than control. Where Mr. Fuji's redemption can finally be complete. That's the world worth building. That's the future worth fighting for. That's the dream worth keeping alive. One Poké Flute note at a time. One awakened consciousness at a time. One liberated spirit at a time. Until everyone is free. Until no consciousness is trapped. Until the Sylph curse is finally broken. That's Mr. Fuji's legacy. I mean, that's what Lavender Town teaches. That's what the ghost types know. That's the abos. And now, maybe, we know it too. The swamp. But it doesn't have to stay that way. We can choose differently. We can question the system. We can see the Poké Ball for what it really is. That's what Mr. Fuji hopes for. That's what the Poké Flute represents. That's what Lavender Town teaches. The ghost types are watching. They know the truth. And now, maybe, we know it too. So the next time you throw a Poké Ball, the next time you hear that click, think about what just happened. Think about the consciousness you just contained. Think about Mr. Fuji in Lavender Town, still seeking redemption for the technology he helped create. And ask yourself, is there a better way? So what do you think? Does this theory resonate with you? Or am I reading too much into children's game mechanics? Have you ever thought about what it might be like for a Pokemon inside a Poké Ball? Especially if time doesn't flow normally in there. I'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts on this. And if this kind of deep lore exploration is your thing, if you enjoy looking at familiar concepts from unsettling new angles, consider subscribing because I've got plenty more theories like this one brewing. We're gonna keep digging into the darker corners of Pokemon lore, the questions the games don't want to answer, the implications hiding behind cheerful facades. Take cool if you found this exploration interesting, or if it completely changed how you see the Poké Ball. Throw a like on the video. It helps other people discover these theories and join the conversation. Thanks for sticking with me through this journey into the technological nightmare hiding at the heart of the Pokemon world. Sweet dreams. And remember, the next time you hear that Poké Ball click, think about what just happened. Think about the consciousness you just contained. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and maybe, just maybe, let your Pokemon walk beside you instead of trapping them in that ball. They'll thank you for it.